Okay, welcome to another I Love Dentistry hangout. My name is Curtis Marshall with the I Love Dentistry show, and we're really excited to have one of the leaders in the hygiene field, Rachel. Rachel, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing great, Curtis. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Tell us, where are you broadcasting from?
I am in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Well, good. We're happy to hear the Southern Belle accent on
Thank
today.
you. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, good day here in Charlotte. Good summer day.
And we also have co-host Rob the Number Geek. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Curtis. I'm excited to hear from Rachel. Um, she's she's a hygiene genius, so we'll be able to learn some good stuff.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So, as you can tell, the title is When You Should Fire a Dentist, or excuse me, Hygienist. When you should fire a hygienist. But we're going to talk about not only when to fire, but when to hire and expand your hygiene team. Uh, as always, please feel free to like us, push the thumbs up button right here above us, and if you have any comments or questions, ask them in the comments below, and myself, Rachel, or Rob will get back to you on those. So with that, when you should fire, let's start with that first one. When should you fire a hygienist? I keep wanting to say dentist
Yeah,
there.
well, you keep saying that. That's what everybody really wants to hear, right? How do we fire a dentist?
Yeah,
Oh
especially
gosh.
the
Okay, so
hygiene.
yeah, I love this. You're putting me on the hot seat right away. So when should you fire? So it's interesting that just in the last week or so, I have had some real life conversations with dentists about these exact topics. So I think it'll be fun to draw from some real life examples. And one of the things that has come up recently with the dentist that I spoke with is um, some incongruencies in his practice. And from the dental restorative side, he's done all this continuing education, lots of postgraduate work, very intense study of, high-level restorative dentistry. The doctor's really excited about that. Really a big piece of his practice. Really wants to have an inflammation-free practice, and yet the hygiene department, there is no perio protocol at all. So, it's impossible to have an inflammation-free practice when the inflammation isn't being treated. And so, he was really great and very open and just saying, look, I'm just really frustrated in this area. I don't know what to do with my hygiene department. They don't seem to be motivated to take things to the next level and really get some information to do that. So I don't know what to do. Should we just eliminate the hygiene department, or what should we do here? And what it really came down to was he was feeling really tired of having to carry the load for the whole practice as far as the education of patients and the treatment planning and diagnosis from scratch. And what he's really asking for is for the hygienist to really step up and to be partners, right? Be partners in diagnosis. Now, obviously the dentist is doing the final diagnosis, but there's certainly plenty of room for hygienists and dental assistants, for that matter, too, to collaborate in the diagnostic process with the doctor. So the way that this all comes back to when do you know if you should fire a hygienist is I asked him, just based on some comments that he made about his hygienist being resistant to doing periotherapy, and there was one hygienist in the practice that was really into it, and the others just said, no, we don't want to do it, so we're just going to give it all to her. Um, and I asked him, I said, do you think you have the right members on your hygiene team to really accomplish this and to close this gap in your practice and take hygiene to the next level? And he said, I'm not sure. And the advice that I gave him was to first really be honest and open and have a heart-to-heart conversation with the hygienist in where he felt the practice was going, and to really address the fact that the hygiene department wasn't following the path and the treatment philosophy that the doctor had set up for this practice. And this doctor is pretty new in the practice. The hygiene department's been there a while, so you're seeing all this kind of background information that is critical here. But I still think it's important for the dentist to give the hygiene team a shot and say, look, here's my vision for this. I'm willing to bring in the training that you need. You know, he's talking to us about coming in and doing some coaching. I'm willing to bring in the training that you need to get you the equipment that you need to do this higher level of care. But I'm going to need you guys to be on board. And you know, once that conversation is had, then it's really going to be the hygienist's decision of whether or not they want to stay on board and really get to this next level with him or move on to another practice. So I think that, I mean, there are obvious reasons why you would let an employee go. You know, things like habitual lateness, unprofessional behavior with patients and other team members, dishonesty, you know, all of those obvious things why you would terminate an employee. But if none of those are in place and it's just this frustration and tension between the hygienist and the doctor, sometimes clear expectations and a really clear sense of the vision can kind of help the hygienist self-select as to whether or not, yeah, I'm on board for this. It might be a little uncomfortable and I'm going to have to do some different things, but let's go. Or, yeah, I'm not ready to do that and I need to find another dental home.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have a friend who is worried, the same exact situation that you're talking about here, worried that their dental team or hygiene team was not living up to what he expected. And I gave him a similar example of saying, hey, just talk to him, communicate.
Yeah.
And he talked to her, and guess what happened? She left. She said,
yeah.
Oh,
so she made the decision for him. Yeah.
So he didn't have to fire her, whatever you want to call it. He was able to release that. Rob, as far as the numbers are concerned, is this similar, or what else do you see as far as this this topic of firing? Are we on the right page? Where are we going?
You know, from a numerical standpoint, I mean, everybody knows that watches the show. I love numbers. I'm a number geek. Anything that can be looked at and analyzed with numbers, I love to do. And when it comes to hygiene, there's some things that are important with numbers. You know, and one of them is related to how much you're paying a hygienist in relation to the amount of work that they're producing that actually ends up being collectible. And so there's some guidelines and standards, and we can talk specifically about that. And I believe that most hygienists can be rehabilitated, you know, can be brought to a point where they can bring that number in line. But if they're not willing to accept training or improvement or have a desire to work towards that, all you're doing is killing yourself. You know, there's some hygiene departments that I've come across in our time in talking with practices, looking at and evaluating their numbers, where a hygiene department will collect a certain amount of money or will produce what ends up being collected, a certain amount of money, and the amount of wages and expense that's being paid out to that hygiene department was nearly almost equivalent to the amount that was being produced and collected. And in that situation, I mean, that's a very bad situation. You know, some of that is a fault of the hygienist, but in most situations, it's actually the fault of I hate to say the dentist, but dentists, you know, if you're watching this, it's your responsibility to help them know where that should be and help put those guidelines in place of what those expectations are. But if they're not willing to work towards expectations or to improve themselves, when we're talking about numerical aspects, and we can talk more specifics, then I would say that'd be a time.
That is good advice from the number geek and great advice from the expert Rachel. Rachel, is there anything else you want to add on this line?
Yeah, I totally agree with Rob. And it's like you guys have been watching me on my client calls lately. This is interesting how this is coming together. But I had another conversation with a large practice where the doctors have been really generous with the hygiene team, and the point that they had set their commission at and all the additional benefits that were there, they would never get to that 3-to-1, you know, profitability ratio. And I've told them, I said, that may be okay with you. You just need to know the facts, and if you change it, you know, you got some really great hygienists on board here. you're gonna feel some tension there, and there's no way getting around it. So I think I completely agree with Rob, is that I feel like most hygienists are probably frustrated with the way things are as much as the dentists are, but they've maybe never had the conversation together about what could be done to improve things. So I too believe that most hygienists are willing, when there's some training available and clear expectations set, and if they're not, then just what happened with your friend Curtis is they'll find out that that might not be the best dental home for them, and so yeah, I think we're right on the same page.
Well, good. I'm glad that I think we accomplished the when to fire hygienist.
Okay.
I want to say awful, just because it's really a difficult thing. I mean, we're a family within the dental practice. We want to be growing together, and we see each other every day, and it's just really hard. So, but I think we took away three good things: communicate, set expectations, and make sure that they're in line HR-wise, meaning, just like you said, Rachel, making sure that they're staying within those HR guidelines.
Yeah.
So, three good takeaways. Okay, next. And this is one of my favorites, is when should you, because I see dentists oftentimes, they're doing the hygiene. They don't have a hygienist. So when do you get one? When do you get a hygienist on your team? Rachel, I'm going to start with Rob on this one, numbers-wise, and then I want you to kick in.
Perfect.
So, Rob.
Okay. So, I'm really viewing this, or taking this, Curtis, from the standpoint of a dentist, like you said, who's doing their own hygiene. Maybe they're starting off, maybe they're just building up a practice, maybe it's even a practice that they're building up from scratch. And I think in general, in most situations, it's hard to say that there's a time that's too soon to have a hygienist. Doing your own hygiene may seem initially like a great idea. I'm going to save some money, I'm going to do this work, I'm going to be able to identify things, but overall and generally numerically, as we run and look at the numbers, and in almost every situation, it makes more financial sense for you to hire a hygienist, focus on the things that you can, focus on the dentistry. And one of the biggest mistakes that dentists make is to not put enough focus and emphasis on having their hygienist, having a hygienist program, building up that program, because that really is what feeds the entire practice and makes it successful. So I would say the time to hire a hygienist is if any time when you do not have a hygienist, you need to hire a hygienist.
Well, all right. Well, coming from the number geek himself, you heard it straight from his mouth. There's no there's no time to not have one. Rachel, let's hear your 2 cents.
Yeah, so that's good to hear from the numbers guy. I mean, I kind of expected he was going to say, well, when you're doing X number of profies and, this much in hygiene production, and then that's when you need to hire a hygienist. So it's interesting because I've spoken recently with a very successful manufacturer's account manager in Texas, and she does a lot of startups, and she said the same thing, and I agree. It sends mixed messages to your patients as a dentist when you're doing hygiene. So it can be either they think, well, you're not doing well enough to be able to afford a hygienist, or the opposite can happen is when you do bring a hygienist on, then they think that the hygienist is maybe less than good, or not as good as the dentist, doing the hygiene procedures. So I think the same thing is true. And I mean, ideally, if you can start off with, 1 or 2 days a week, but typically that's how your practice is going to begin, and you really want to be focused on honing your clinical skills. You may be doing some of the marketing and some of the face-to-face, getting to know people in your community, and that's important for the dentist to be able to focus on that and not really be doing hygiene. And by the way, it's also a second party that is reinforcing and building up the doctor's, the confidence in the doctor with the patients, and also helping to enroll treatment for the doctor. And by the way, really setting a great foundation and starting the practice with the strong perio protocol and hygiene systems is just going to help the practice grow so much faster.
And that we've second witness. It's the second saying, "Hey, yes, what the doctor is saying is true. You have a cavity," or even
Right.
before the doctor comes in,
Yes.
I'm seeing something. The doctor will confirm it for me, but I'm seeing it really soft. It's got some dark spots. Whatever it might be. And so, thank you, Rachel,
Yeah.
for saying that.
Yeah.
Rob, anything else as far as when to get a hygienist?
I'd say the only exception to that is if we're talking about doing hygiene with children. But aside from that, I'd say proceed forward.
Great, great. Well, here's another good topic too, and something that's mistaken or not understood is when to expand your hygiene team, and then we'll get into kind of assisted hygiene. But when to get more than one hygienist? Oftentimes, we've talked in the past on the I Love Dentistry show is when to get another associate doctor, but when should we get another hygienist within the team? I mean, that's a big commitment. We'll talk about the numbers second, but Rachel, tell us when do doctors anywhere need to expand their hygiene team?
So we look at a lot of numbers from this perspective too, and actually I was speaking with a two-doctor practice recently that was asking this question because they have another chair that they want to utilize, and they were getting some encouragement from another advisor to start utilizing that chair, but they have quite a bit of open time with their existing hygienists, and they've had some change in their hygienists' number of days that they're working and that kind of thing. So we do a very detailed analysis of the hygiene department, as I'm sure you guys do, looking at the numbers, and we looked at the capacity. And one of the kind of just standard benchmarks, this is a very kind of big picture look at it, is that every 4-day-a-week hygienist needs to have at least 800 patients in recare to stay busy. Now, if you're seeing a lot of perio maintenance patients, you have a very perio-aware practice, and your hygienists are doing a lot of periotherapy, or if they're seeing 2-hour new patient visits or things like that, then you don't need quite as many. But you can run the numbers and see how many patients did our hygienists care for over the last 12 months. And then one of the really simple things is just looking at the schedule. Once you start getting to the point where your schedule is booking out 6-8 weeks ahead and it's staying full, then it's time to bring on more hygiene hours, because you want patients to get in for treatment that they need in a timely manner. So the worst thing for a hygienist that's trying to implement a perio protocol is when he or she is trying to create this sense of urgency with the patient to address the infection, and then the patient goes up to schedule their treatment and they can't be seen for 8 weeks later. So you need to have room to reserve time for new patients if you're seeing new patients through hygiene. You need to have time to reserve for perio maintenance and periotherapy, so that creates very profitable and productive days, but also it gets the patients the treatment they need in a really timely manner.
Preach on, Rachel. I hope all the doctors wrote that down. If not, rewind this and watch that again. That's some really good takeaways for when to expand your hygiene department. I mean, really, you need to make sure that you have enough time for your production, but most importantly, you want to keep those guys busy, because if they're not busy, guess what? You're not busy. And so, really good. Rob, is there anything on the numbers end?
The numbers that Rachel said, I think, are right on. 200 patients in your hygiene program per day per hygienist, which every 6 months, it means there's 26 days that the hygienist is working if they're working on Monday, which means there's 7.69 visits on average per day. So that is the number to shoot for. Now, where this comes into play is a lot of people think they have way more people in their hygiene program than they actually do.
Yes.
A typical practice that we look at has 31% of their patients with some type of future scheduled appointment. So meaning if you have 1,000 active patients, you really only have 310 patients that have a future scheduled appointment. Most dentists don't really believe that this is true. They believe they have 70% of their patients that are, that are on their schedule or in their program, and that's because the average dentist reschedules 71% of their patients. When they come in for hygiene, 71% is the average that gets rescheduled. But as you extrapolate that out, you see them one time. You started with let's say you started with 1,000 patients in your hygiene program. You see them, you schedule 71% of those. Now you have 710. You've got another 290 that are essentially lost. Out of those 710, now you schedule 71% again, which ends up with about 500. So now you're 1 year away. Now you go for another 6 months, for 18 months. Now that's what we're talking about in an active patient, those you've seen over the last 18 months. That 500 patients now come in to see you, and you reschedule those. Now you got 354. So out of 1,000 patients, now you're down to 354, which is about 35%. And so in most situations, there's not enough. You need to do some things to be able to bolster and get more of those patients back into the program. So those are some numbers or statistics to look at. When you're looking at how many patients you have in your program, you're probably going to believe that you have twice as many as you actually do.
Yeah.
Second thing to look at is when you look at how much is being produced or collected within your practice, and what is the relationship of how much of that is hygiene versus the total. We look at a number of, somewhere between 26 and 30%. If you're under 26%, there's definitely some things that you need to do to bolster that program. If you're a whole lot over 30%, and maybe Rachel would say something different, that's also unhealthy, not from the hygiene perspective, but that means that you're not identifying enough treatment, or that you're not getting a high enough case acceptance. So 26 to 30% of your total collections is what is kind of the range that we feel like that you should be shooting for. So when to expand that program is always anytime that you have physical capacity in terms of space, you should be expanding that program and utilizing as much as you possibly can. The benchmark to try to shoot for is 80% of your patients with a future scheduled appointment. So if you have 1,000 active patients, we want to have 800 of those at least have some type of future scheduled appointment, and that to be maintained. So not necessarily a direct answer, Curtis, but some of the numbers at least as it relates to that.
Oh, once again, those are crucial to proven numbers too. I hope if you didn't write those down, rewind again. I've never said rewind in a hangout before, but times here. Rachel, tell me what you think. You haven't heard Rob before as far as hygiene. Where is this in relation to the hygiene expert? How is this? How's this measuring up?
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that, Curtis, because I was going to say that, like, we did not pre-plan this interview. In fact, we didn't talk about it at all, and it's dead on. And I never heard that kind of description of, you're scheduling this many, and then the next time they come in, you're scheduling 70% more, and dentists wonder why, oh my gosh, we're seeing all these new patients. Why isn't hygiene growing? And that's why. Mm-hmm. And that's why, and it's very frustrating because they think, well, we should just be adding hygiene days all the time, and the reality is that, you're never going to get to 100% unless you're just starting out and you have, 100 patients. And this happens really often with large, long-standing practices. They'll have 10,000 patients, and yet only 3,000 are really active and in recare. And so you're exactly right. We see it all the time where, they're at 35 to 50% what we call recare effectiveness, which is the percentage of patients that are in recare, and it's just shocking. And it takes some work to get that up. It takes a combination of, kind of culling through and figuring who's really inactive, but we really caution practices from inactivating too quickly. So it kind of is working from both ends. It's really kind of auditing the charts and figuring out, okay, who really do we have patients in here that have said they're not coming back? The other end is the reactivation piece, and that gets into a whole lot of detail on how to do that. But I think those numbers are dead on. And Rob, what you said about, once hygiene is getting to be over 35 to 40%, I get worried about the doctor's schedule. Exactly what you said that is just a real clear sign that there's not enough care being accepted on the doctor's schedule. And so you think, okay, well, this is good, like you've at least got hygiene that's carrying some of that weight, but they're carrying way too much weight, and look how much more profitable you can be. So I think those numbers are exactly what we suggest. Now, I will say, with this example of this particular practice, and then wanting to utilize this fourth chair, is, I felt like how to say this? So Rob said always be expanding, and yet you must have the infrastructure to make sure that the hygiene that you have in place now is profitable and working at its highest capacity. So right. What you don't want to do is just throw another hygienist in that chair, and then everybody wonders why there's all this open time and they're not productive. It's like you're kind of putting them into a less than ideal situation. So my advice for these doctors was, if you do nothing different, they had a lot of opportunity to grow in several areas in the hygiene department, in particular the perio department. And really, to be honest, most practices, even that are doing pretty well with perio, can tweak things and get to the next level pretty easily. So I said, if you do nothing different, you're going to kind of be where you are. If you want to do some things different and you want to really take it to the next level, then yes, you can. You have potential to expand into that fourth chair. And that's a great, there are a lot of practices, and it's a good problem to have, but it's a problem nonetheless that don't have the facility to expand into, but yet they have the patient demand to do it. So, yeah, a lot of really interesting kind of numbers to look at and things to consider with that.
One thing specifically about hiring somebody, and when I say always be expanding, I don't necessarily mean always be hiring hygienists or always expanding your days, but you go get those visits on your schedule first. If you have 1,000 active patients and you have 310 patients on your future schedule, which you probably do if you have 1,000 patients, you probably only have 310. Go get more appointments on your schedule.
Right.
Do a better job when patients come in, and change that number from being 70% of those patients being rescheduled to have it being 90 or 95%. Get more patients on your schedule. When you do, then it will require you to expand it from the human resource side of things. But first,
it'll just happen organically
on your schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Know where you are first. Then you'll come to the realization, holy crap, we need to get more appointments on our schedule.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, good. So with this, both Rob and Rachel, you both mentioned the 30%, and that doctors will think that it's higher. And Rachel, you're incongruent with that statement?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, we probably in the practices that we analyze, I would say their recare effectiveness is higher than that, but it's probably only 50%, so it's not a lot higher. But I would say absolutely that practice owners always think that they have more active patients than they do, and they're always shocked when they see that number.
So my question is, why? Why is it, and we'll just briefly discuss this, but why is it that the dentist, and really even the front office and the hygiene, why do they think they've rescheduled when in reality it's 30 to 50%, whatever it is, it's less than ideal? Why is that? I'm going to just throw that out for whoever wants to take it.
Yeah, so I think, and I based on what you told me about what you guys do, a lot of it's because they don't track it, so they don't know. So they think, the majority of patients are pre-appointing, and by the way, you should have 90 to 95% of your hygiene patients pre-appointing, for their next visit. So they think that that's happening, but they're not tracking it, so they really don't know. So you can't change something that you don't know whether or not it's working. And they're not looking at that percentage of the patients that have the next appointment. They just don't know, and things are moving along, you know. And I always challenge them to look at open time and say, okay, so let's look at what percentage of this really is, you know, the cancellations and no-shows that everybody struggles with, and how much of it is just simply that you don't have enough patients to keep the schedule busy. Because if your capacity is at minute that someone cancels, you have a list of people to come back in, and you fill that time. So, and I would say that we have more practices that we talk to that are on that like higher open time than we do the ones that are working at full capacity. And I mean, that's probably no surprise to the dental community, because that open hygiene time is one of the things that folks struggle with most. But I mean, that might be kind of a simplistic answer, but I think a lot of it's because they don't track it, and they don't know what's working and what's not.
Rachel,
Well,
I hope you're looking at Rob's face here. He's holding back the biggest smile when you said that. So I know Rob wants to say something. Rob, spit. What's going on?
okay. What she said is so true about they don't track it. And when you don't track it, then you just go based upon what you feel like is happening. And it feels like we're rescheduling these people. They tell me we're rescheduling these people. We're rescheduling probably, we think in our mind, 80, 90%. Everybody's scheduling. They're all on the schedule. And they've never really extrapolated that math, that 70% reschedule goes to 50, goes to 35. And so they don't track it. And so I would one thing I would recommend that you do if you're watching this right now is go pull up your practice management software. Go pull up how many active patients, and by active I mean those that you've seen in the last 18 months, not really those that are just marked as active, but those that you've seen in the last 18 months, write that number down. Then go run a report and see how many future appointments you have on your schedule from today to infinity, you know, sometime in the future. It'll make you put in a date range. You can put a year out. You probably don't need to put anything greater than that. That's going to give you a number. Write that number down. Now go divide that. You're going to have 1,000 active patients. You're going to have probably right around 310 patients on your future schedule. Mm-hmm. That's going to tell you where your effectiveness is. So start measuring that number. Mm-hmm. Now, take that number and you want to improve that overall percentage and improve that overall number. Second thing is, a lot of times dentists will even feel, again, there's that word feel again, the dentist will feel like their hygiene is at capacity. They may even have, become accustomed to a certain number of hygiene days, and they may even have that certain number of days booked out for a certain amount of time period, so they feel like they're busy and they feel like they're successful. But once they start to compare that with what percentage of their patients have an appointment, and what percentage of their total collections are coming from hygiene, or their collectible production comes from hygiene, then it becomes a reality of where they really are. If that number is not 80% or greater, and what percentage of your patients have a future appointment, and you're not in that range between 26 and 30% of what percentage of your collectible production is coming from hygiene, then there's some adjustments to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right. So I think we've really mastered this information as far as when to expand your hygiene department. One thing that I don't know. Do we want to jump in? Rachel, tell me. Do we want to jump into assisted hygiene as far as helping expanding that, or is that something we should stay away from today?
I think that could be a whole nother hangout in itself. I really do.
I agree.
Go ahead.
You get some whole other nuances with capacity that really become a big part of that, and so I agree with you that that's a whole nother topic. One thing I would like to get some feedback from Rachel on, when we talk about expanding hygiene to a dentist, what that really means is, okay, I'm going to get more money from my hygiene department. It's not necessarily meaning I'm just going to get more visits. So some of that comes from more visits and having more patients in, but some of that comes with hygienists being more effective in the things that they're doing and they're offering during that time frame, and also becoming more efficient. I'm interested to get some perspective from Rachel on those two things, with hygienists becoming more effective, you know, with sealants and you know, other types of things, as well as perio maintenance, and then also becoming more efficient with their amount of time, and what is a reasonable efficiency level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great point, because years ago I did an interview, I believe it was with Woody Oakes, about expanded hygiene, and I kind of took the spin of exactly what you just mentioned, Rob, is, you know, it doesn't have to just mean more patients working out of 2 chairs or that kind of thing. It's really about expanding what a hygienist is currently offering, you know, as far as services and expanding efficiency and that kind of thing. And one of the things that, you know, we talk about a lot, in fact, we talk about it so much that sometimes we feel like people are tired of us talking about it, but then we just did a survey recently on CE topics, and it came up again. Number 1 is the perio diagnosis and treatment conversation. You know, that is an area that can be refined in most practices, and in some practices dramatically turned around. Yeah, certainly sealants. I mean, looking at the service mix is another great way to use your numbers. Is, you know, the majority of what you're doing, procedures in hygiene, are they all prophies? You know, if they're mostly prophies and you're seeing very little of anything else, and you have a lot of room to expand hygiene by just adding other services that, by the way, your patients need and are going to help your patients be healthier and have a better dental experience. And then as far as efficiency goes, you know, one of the things we hear a lot is, you know, how do I do more in the time that I have? I mean, you know, you're asking me to do this and do blood pressure and do medical history review and all these things, and what we find is the most inefficient, I'm saying this and then I'm kind of questioning myself, but I'm going to say it anyway. Probably the most inefficient thing in the hygiene appointment is the scaling time. You know, whether it is picking up and putting down instruments over and over again, whether it is doing way more scaling than should be done in a prophy, you know, that often is a real area of inefficiency. And it's also a place where I'm a hygienist, so, you know, I can say this is, hygienists are pretty protective about that. You know, when we're in hygiene school, I mean, you just, your grade just gets slashed every time there's a piece of plaque or stain or calculus that's there, and so we take that into the real world with us, and but yet we don't realize that we've gone from, you know, having 3 hours with a patient to having an hour if we're lucky. And so one of the areas of efficiency that we really is really one of our missions as a company is getting hygienists to shift the mindset towards utilizing power scalers. You know, they're a primary scaling tool, rather than you know, relying so heavily first on the hand instruments. And then maybe we pick up the ultrasonics because we know we're supposed to, or to just irrigate some, but really switching that around, because that can allow the hygienist a lot more time in the hygiene visit to do higher level diagnostics, to do education, to talk about the things that are going to help patients accept treatment, instead of that whole appointment being dominated by the scaling time.
Correct. I didn't think about that. That's a great point.
Awesome. Rob? Hey, Curtis, there's a formula there, you know, and the number geek in me has to spit it out. But it's basically, there's 3 components. You've got effort, effectiveness, and efficiency. And you multiply those 3 together, and that's really what your result is. So, you know, number of visits or amount of time from a hygienist, that's your effort. Then you've got effectiveness in what all is being offered, and how can we maximize the amount of work that's being done, you know, in sealants, in perio maintenance, and all of those things. And then also efficiency. We times those 3 things together, and that's really what gives you your overall program.
Yeah.
And so we may need to focus on effort. We may need to focus on effectiveness. We may need to focus on efficiency. All 3 of those times together is what's going to give you your end result.
I love that. That's fascinating. You should write an article on that, because if you don't, I might.
Okay, I will. All right.
You guys can co-write it. You guys can co-write it together.
Yeah,
that's what we need
good.
to do. Yeah, yeah.
All right, so once again, I'm so grateful that we were able to get together today with the expert, Miss Rachel from North Carolina. She, I hope you were able to write all this down too, because as she said, this is one, as you know and have seen before, this is uncut and unscripted. So these are things that are true issues going on within the dental field. It's not an agenda that we're pushing today. But so I hope you understand the importance of hygiene. We talked about when to fire, when to hire, and when to expand. And so please take this in your practice. Start practicing by numbers, and also taking care of your hygiene team so that you can be a better clinician, dentist out there. And with that being said, why don't we wrap up and see why everybody loves dentistry. I haven't heard why Rachel has. I have heard why Rob has before. So, Rachel, I'm going to give you the mic to you. Why do you love dentistry?
Oh gosh. Well, this is why I love dentistry. I mean, just, having just amazing people to collaborate with. And I'm going to give a little plug, because we haven't done this yet, for our company, Inspired Hygiene. So check out inspiredhygiene.com. But this year we're working, one-on-one in a dental practice in, Helena, Montana, or whether we're doing a Google Hangout or we're at a speaking event. Why I love dentistry is just the people. I mean, I just over and over and over, it is confirmed to me that we really and truly are an industry full of a lot of people that want to make a difference with each other and with our patients, the people that we serve. We want to help people in the dental industry have, better lives, less stress, do well so that we can give back, and that we just really love collaborating, and we love sharing ideas in order to make everybody better, and that's really what I love most about dentistry.
Awesome. Thank you. And same here. We both feel the same way about you, and we're grateful that you're able to join on today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
You got Number Geek. Why do you love dentistry?
People are normally drawn to one of three things: people, ideas, or things. I tend to like all three of those. When I was younger, as relates to things, I used to take things apart and look at everything inside and see how it works, and then put it back together and see if I could make it better. One of the things I love about dentistry, I mean, that we're talking about things. I love the people in dentistry, but also as we talk about ideas, I love to do that same thing. Take it apart, see what's inside, what are the things that add up to it, how do we improve it? And dentistry is an awesome area to be able to do that. When we look at hygiene, again, we take it apart, look at what are the pieces inside. We're talking about effort, effectiveness, efficiency, and what are those parts? How do we improve it? Put it together, make it something better. That's what I love about dentistry.
That is very true about Rob. He loves to dissect things, sometimes almost too much, but that's why we have him on the team. So myself, I'm going to say it again. There's nothing better than a first impression, and dentistry can help that. It's helped myself. I was able to get cosmetic dentistry, and it's improved my lifestyle as a patient. And so that is something that I thank all you dentists out there for being able to help individuals feel more confident and happy about their lifestyle. And so that's kind of how I'll end. We do want to thank our sponsor today, Dental Intel, who help dentists lead by numbers and not emotions to get them in a more profitable and happier lifestyle. You can check them out at dentalintel.com. You can see that up here. You can also see Rachel's contact information on her website above here as well. If you're on the ilovedentistry.org site, if you're on the YouTube, just go to the ilovedentistry.org, and you can find out all that information. With that being said, my name is Curtis Marshall with the co-host Number Geek Rob Bay and the beautiful and expert Miss Rachel. So thanks everybody for joining. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks so much. Till next time.
Curtis.